The smell of ozone and stale cigarette smoke is the first thing you notice as you step into the small, cramped room, a scent that has become as familiar to you as the rhythm of your own breathing. Outside, the world is a vast, howling expanse of white, a frozen Siberian tundra where the wind screams against the corrugated metal walls of the outpost, yet inside, the air is thick, warm, and unnervingly still. You feel the heavy weight of your woolen tunic pressing against your shoulders, the fabric slightly damp from the condensation that clings to everything in this place. Your boots, thick and lined with felt, make no sound as you cross the concrete floor toward the glow of the radio equipment. You settle into the wooden chair, feeling the familiar ache in your lower back as the slats bite into your spine, a constant companion during these long 12-hour shifts. The room is dark, save for the hypnotic amber radiance of the vacuum tubes behind the glass panels of the receivers. They hum with a low, visceral vibration that you feel in your teeth, a steady, rhythmic drone that seems to anchor you to the earth while the rest of the world remains lost in the blizzard. You reach out, your fingers brushed by the chill of the metal casing, and begin to turn the heavy Bakelite dials. The static in your headphones is a physical force, a rushing waterfall of white noise that masks the secrets of the hemisphere. You are a Cipher clerk, an invisible ghost in the machinery of the Cold War, and though no one in the bustling streets of Moscow or the brightly lit avenues of Washington knows your name, the safety of the world rests in the steady movement of your wrists. As you sit there, the silence of the outpost is broken only by the scratching of your pencil against the rough paper of your logbook. You wait for the signal, that piercing, rhythmic chirping that cuts through the static like a needle through silk. It is the sound of Morse code, a language of dots and dashes that has become more natural to you than your mother tongue. When it finally comes, it is faint, drifting in from a station thousands of miles away, perhaps from a submarine prowling the dark Atlantic, or a hidden transmitter in a humid jungle. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm take hold of your mind, your hand moving in a practiced, fluid motion as you transcribe the strings of 5-digit groups. This is the silent front, a war fought not with lead and steel, but with logic, mathematics, and the sheer endurance of the human spirit in the face of isolation. The steady pulse of the code is almost like a heartbeat, a reminder that even here, at the edge of the habitable world, you are connected to a vast, invisible web of human intention. It is a comforting thought as you settle deeper into your chair, the warmth of the vacuum tubes chasing away the chill that always seems to seep through the floorboards. If you are settling in for the night, letting the weight of your blankets press you into the mattress, you are exactly where you need to be. Here at the Slumber Archives, we bring you new history narrations like this one every single day, crafted to guide you into a deep and restful sleep. If you find these stories help you drift away, consider subscribing so you never miss a night of quiet reflection. A simple like on the video also helps others find their way to our quiet corner of the world. Now, let us return to the glow of the radio room and the secrets hidden within the static. Your eyes trace the glowing filaments of the tubes, watching the way the light flickers ever so slightly as the signal fluctuates. It is a beautiful, fragile thing, this bridge of light and sound. You think of the men and women on the other side of the transmission, sitting in rooms just like this one, perhaps shivering in the damp heat of a tropical basement, or staring out at the grey, rain-slicked streets of a European capital. You are all bound together by the code, a brotherhood of the lonely, separated by ideology but united by the same physical sensations. The dry itch of the headphones against your ears, the bitter taste of cold tea in a tin mug, and the profound, heavy silence that follows the end of a transmission. You reach for your tea now, the metal handle burning your fingertips for a brief moment before you find a comfortable grip. The liquid is dark and oversteeped, but the warmth spreads through your chest, grounding you in the present moment. You look down at the pages you have filled, rows upon rows of numbers that mean nothing to the uninitiated, yet contain the movements of fleets, the whispers of diplomats, and the blueprints of a future yet to be written. You are the bridge between the raw data of the airwaves and the polished desks of the High Command. Without you, the messages are merely noise. With you, they are the very fabric of history. The work is tedious, demanding a level of concentration that drains the mind, yet there is a meditative quality to it that you have grown to love. In the world outside there are grand speeches and terrifying headlines, but in here there is only the frequency. You adjust the fine-tuning knob, feeling the tension in the spring, the minute resistance of the gears as they align to capture a stray wave of energy. The room feels smaller now, the shadows in the corners deepening as the storm outside intensifies, slamming a drift of snow against the single reinforced window. You don't look out. There is nothing to see but the void. Instead, you focus on the green eye of the tuning indicator, watching it widen and narrow like the pupil of a cat in the dark. As the hours crawl toward midnight, the physical reality of your surroundings begins to blur. The hum of the equipment becomes a lullaby, a subterranean song that speaks of hidden depths and secret currents. You find yourself noticing the small details, the way the lead of your pencil leaves a silvery sheen on the paper, the slight whistle of the wind through a hairline crack in the doorframe, the slow, rhythmic ticking of the master clock on the wall. This clock is the heart of the station, synchronized to the second with every other post across the vast expanse of the Soviet Union. It dictates your life, telling you when to listen, when to transmit, and when you are finally permitted to sleep. The weight of the responsibility is immense, yet it does not feel heavy in the way a burden does. Rather, it feels like a cloak, a protective layer that separates you from the chaos of the ordinary world. In this room, everything has a purpose. Every dial has a function, every wire a destination. There is a profound peace in this order, a clarity that you cannot find anywhere else. You are part of a grand silent orchestra, playing a symphony that no one will ever hear in its entirety. And so you continue to listen, your head bowed, your senses sharp, a solitary sentinel in the frozen dark, waiting for the next spark of light to emerge from the silence of the heavens. The ink on your fingertips is a deep, permanent stain, a mark of the thousands of pages you have turned and the endless lines of code you have transcribed into the ledger. It is a quiet mark of your belonging. But before the ink, before the humming vacuum tubes and the heavy steel doors of the post, there was a different kind of silence, the silence of being watched. You remember the way the air felt in those early days, thick with the weight of unseen eyes, as the state began its long, methodical dissection of your life. It started long before you ever set foot in a secure facility, back when you were merely a face in a lecture hall or a disciplined young soldier in a remote barracks. They were looking for a specific kind of soul, one that was sturdy, predictable, and as clear as a mountain stream. You recall the first interview, held in a room that smelled of floor wax and old tobacco, where the light fell in long, dusty slants across a scarred wooden desk. The man across from you did not ask about your skills or your ambitions. Instead, he asked about your grandfather's village, the books on your father's shelf, and the names of the children you played with when you were 7 years old. It is a strange sensation to have your own history read back to you, to realize that while you were living your life, others were documenting the very edges of it. They searched for cracks in the foundation, a relative who had travelled too far abroad, a whisper of dissent in a distant cousin's past, a moment of hesitation during a political lecture. They required a record that was not just clean, but pristine, a lineage that functioned like a well-oiled machine, free of grit or friction. As you sit now in the dim glow of the monitoring station, You can still feel the spectral weight of that vetting process. It was a slow, deliberate peeling back of layers. They spoke to your teachers, your neighbors, and the girl you once hoped to marry, looking for the limits of your loyalty and the depth of your psychological resilience. They needed to know if you could handle the crushing weight of a secret that you could never share, not even in your sleep. You feel the rough texture of your wool sweater against your neck, a grounding sensation that reminds you of the physical reality of your existence, even as your mind drifts back to that period of waiting. It was a time of purgatory, where your future hung on the contents of a thick manila folder, moving slowly through the corridors of the Lubyanka or the GRU headquarters. The promise they made to you was never spoken in grand, sweeping terms, but rather in the language of stability and comfort. In a world where others stood in long lines for bread or shared cramped apartments with 3 generations of kin, you were offered a different path. You were promised a life of quiet privilege, a private flat with a view of the birch trees, access to shops where the shelves were never bare, and a pension that would ensure a peaceful old age. But the price was a total, voluntary isolation. To accept the keys to this life was to step behind a curtain that would never truly open again. You remember the day you signed the final papers. The scratch of the fountain pen felt like a definitive closing of a door. From that moment on, you were a ghost in your own biography, a man whose true work was invisible to the world. There is a certain comfort in that invisibility, a shedding of the ego that allows you to become a vessel for the state's most sensitive whispers. As you adjust the headset, feeling the cool plastic press against your ears, you think of the psychological tests they put you through, the hours spent in dark rooms, the repetitive tasks designed to measure your patience, the probing questions meant to find your breaking point. They wanted a mind that could find order in chaos, a spirit that would not wither under the monotony of the midnight watch. They found in you a quietude, a capacity to sit with yourself in the stillness without the need for external validation. You are a creature of the shadows, and you have learned to find a strange, ascetic beauty in the gloom. The transition into this world was seamless, a gradual fading of the old you into the you that exists here in the heart of the secret apparatus. You remember the last time you saw your family before the final assignment? The way the wood smoke from the hearth seemed to cling to your hair and clothes, a scent of the earth and the open air that you knew would soon be replaced by the sterile smell of ozone and heated metal. You didn't tell them where you were going, only that you had been given a position of great responsibility in the service of the motherland. There was a pride in your mother's eyes, but also a flicker of something else, a realization that you were becoming a stranger to her, moving into a realm where she could not follow. You felt the ache in your chest as you walked away, the heavy boots you wore crunching on the frozen mud, marking each step toward a life defined by what you could not say. Now, the hum of the cooling fans is your constant companion, a mechanical heartbeat that replaces the sounds of the natural world. You have become accustomed to the rhythm of the shifts, the way time stretches and compresses in this windowless environment. The privilege you are promised is here, in the quality of the tea you brew during your breaks and the crispness of the linens in your private quarters. But it is a lonely sort of luxury. You are surrounded by colleagues who share your burden, men and women with the same hollowed-out histories and the same disciplined gaze, yet you rarely speak of anything of substance. The vetting never truly ends. It merely shifts from an external investigation to an internal vigilance. You watch your own thoughts, filtering them as carefully as you filter the static from the radio waves, ensuring that no stray spark of doubt or longing disturbs the perfect order of your duty. You lean back in your chair, feeling the familiar ache in your lower back, a dull reminder of the hours spent hunched over the desk. It is a small price to pay for the clarity of your purpose. You are the guardian of the silence, the one who sifts through the white noise of the globe to find the hidden truths that keep the machinery of power turning. The isolation is not a prison, but a sanctuary, a place where the complexities of the human experience are reduced to dots and dashes, to frequencies and amplitudes. Here, life is precise. Here, you are essential. The world outside may be vast and unpredictable, filled with the messy emotions and chaotic desires of millions, but within these walls there is only the code, and as long as you remain faithful to the code, the state will remain faithful to you, wrapping you in its cold, protective embrace until the end of your days. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead becomes the soundtrack to your mornings, a steady, low-frequency vibration that seems to settle deep within your marrow. You sit at a narrow wooden desk, the surface scarred by the fingernails and pens of those who occupied this seat before you, and you realize that your education is no longer about the broad strokes of history or the grand theories of the party. It has become a matter of millimeters and milliseconds. Your world has shrunk to the size of a keyboard, but it is a keyboard unlike any the civilian world will ever see. Before you sits the Fialka, a marvel of Soviet engineering that feels heavy and cold to the touch. It is a machine of immense complexity, a successor to the old German Enigma, but far more sophisticated, with its 10 rotors and its punched paper tape that chatters like a mechanical insect. You run your fingers over the keys, feeling the resistance of the springs. Each press requires a deliberate force, a physical commitment to the letter you are striking. To master this machine is to learn a new language, one where the alphabet is constantly shifting, dancing to the rhythm of the internal wiring and the daily settings dictated by the thick, wax-sealed manuals that never leave the sight of the armed guards. As you practice, your instructor moves behind you, his footsteps silent on the linoleum floor. He is not listening to the content of what you type, for the content is gibberish, a string of randomized characters meant to test your speed and accuracy. Instead, he is listening to your fist. This is the term they use for the unique rhythmic signature of a telegrapher's hand, a cadence as personal and unmistakable as a thumbprint or the sound of your own mother's voice. You learn that every operator has a soul that leaks out through their fingertips. One man might linger a fraction of a second too long on the letter K, while another might have a nervous, staccato energy that makes his dashes feel like clipped dots. You are taught to smooth out these idiosyncrasies, to become as anonymous and steady as the machine itself, yet you find that your fist is a stubborn thing. It is the ghost of your individuality resisting the process of total integration. On the long afternoons, when the air in the classroom grows stale and the smell of ozone and machine oil clings to your wool tunic, you find a strange comfort in that rhythm. It is a secret heartbeat, a way of saying, I am here, in a world that demands you be nowhere at all. You tap out the drills, the metal rotors of the Fialka clicking in a frantic metallic chorus, and you imagine your signature travelling through the copper wires and across the ionosphere, a silent song recognized only by those trained to hear the person behind the pulse. The training is grueling, not because of the physical labour, but because of the mental weight of the puzzles you are asked to assemble. You are conditioned to view every intercepted signal, every stray burst of static from a distant embassy or a prowling submarine, as a single piece of a global mosaic. Your instructors project maps onto the wall, vast, darkened expanses of the Atlantic and the Pacific, dotted with tiny glowing points of light. Each point represents a transmission, a whisper in the dark that you must catch and cage. You begin to see the world not as a collection of nations and peoples, but as a shimmering web of electronic signals, a hidden layer of reality that exists just above the threshold of human hearing. There is a psychological shift that happens slowly, almost imperceptibly, during these months of isolation. You start to look at the people you pass in the hallways, the cafeteria workers, the janitors, even your fellow students, and you wonder what signals they are broadcasting. You find yourself decoding the world around you. The way a bird chirps in the courtyard becomes a series of shorts and longs. The flickering of a street lamp in the distance is a message waiting to be transcribed. It is a form of hyper-awareness that borders on the spiritual, a belief that nothing is ever truly random, and that if you only listen closely enough, the universe will yield its most guarded secrets. The weight of the wool cloak you wear during the evening drills feels heavier now, a physical manifestation of the responsibility settling onto your shoulders. When you walk back to your barracks in the biting evening air, the cold stone under your boots feels solid and reassuring. It is a reminder of the material world, a world that you are now tasked with protecting through the mastery of the immaterial. You look up at the stars, and for a moment, they don't look like distant suns. They look like the holes in a fialka's punch tape, a cosmic code that the great architect has laid out across the blackness of space. In the School of Secrets, you are taught that silence is your most powerful weapon, but the machine is your most faithful companion. You spend hours cleaning the fialka, using a small brush to whisk away the tiny flakes of paper and dust that accumulate in its guts. You oil the gears with a steady hand, watching as the amber liquid coats the steel, ensuring that the movement remains fluid and silent. There is a meditative quality to this maintenance. The world outside may be teetering on the brink of nuclear fire. The headlines may scream of blockades and revolutions, but here, in the dim light of the workshop, there is only the tension of the spring and the alignment of the rotor. As the weeks turn into months, the psychological conditioning deepens. You are told that the enemy is also listening, that they have their own schools, their own machines, and their own young men sitting in rooms just like this one. You are encouraged to visualize them, your counterparts in Maryland or Cheltenham, as shadows on the other side of a mirror. You are locked in a silent duel with someone you will never meet, a person whose fist you might one day recognize on the airwaves. This realization creates a strange sense of kinship with the adversary. You are both priests of the same hidden religion, bound by the same rules of logic and mathematics, separated only by the ideologies that have placed you on opposite sides of the wire. You learn to embrace the isolation. The school is a cocoon, and the outside world begins to feel thin and unreal, like a movie played at the wrong speed. Your dreams are filled with the sound of the rotors turning, a rhythmic thrumming that follows you into sleep. In these dreams, you are no longer a person. You are a conduit, a bridge between the silence and the word. You feel the ache in your lower back from sitting upright for 10 hours a day, a dull, throbbing reminder of your service. You feel the calluses forming on the tips of your fingers, the skin becoming tough and desensitized, as if your body is preparing itself to interface more perfectly with the metal of the machine. Everything is a piece of the puzzle. The way the commandant clears his throat before an announcement, the specific shade of grey the sky turns before a snowstorm, the way the tea tastes slightly of wood smoke in the early morning. It all feels significant, all part of a larger pattern that you are being trained to perceive. You are no longer just a clerk, you are becoming a cartographer of the invisible. And as you lay your head down on the thin institutional pillow at the end of another long day, you find that you are no longer afraid of the dark. The dark is simply where the signals are clearest. The dark is where the code lives, and you are the one who holds the key. The transition from student to practitioner is marked by a final exam that lasts for 36 hours without sleep. You are placed in a small, windowless booth with nothing but your fialka, a stack of encrypted logs, and a thermos of bitter black coffee. The air grows thick with the smell of your own sweat and the ozone of the machine. Your eyes burn, the edges of your vision blurring until the characters on the page seem to squirm like tiny black ants. But you do not stop. You cannot stop. You find a second wind, then a third, as the rhythm of the fist takes over, your hands moving with a grace that feels entirely detached from your exhausted mind. When you finally emerge from the booth, blinking in the harsh light of the corridor, you are different. You have passed through the fire, and the person who entered the School of Secrets has been burned away, replaced by someone who understands that the truth is never found on the surface. The truth is something that must be excavated, decrypted, and guarded with your very life. You feel the cold stone underfoot once more, but now it feels like a foundation. You are ready to take your place in the hidden architecture of the state, to become a silent sentinel in a listening post at the edge of the world, where the only thing between peace and catastrophe is your ability to hear the whisper in the noise. The smell of damp concrete and floor wax greets you as you step through the heavy, reinforced door of Station S, a scent that will soon become as familiar to you as the breath in your own lungs. You are standing in a building that, from the outside, appears to be nothing more than a nondescript apartment block on the outskirts of a greying city, or perhaps a mundane agricultural research station tucked away in the rolling hills of the countryside. To the passing traveller or the unsuspecting neighbour, this is a place of quiet, unremarkable routines. But as the door clicks shut behind you, the illusion of the ordinary dissolves into the reality of the clandestine. You walk down a long, narrow corridor where the walls are painted a pale institutional green, a colour designed to soothe the eyes during long hours of vigilance. The air here feels heavy and strangely still, as if the very atmosphere is being filtered and weighed. You notice the way the light from the recessed fluorescent fixtures hums with a low, steady frequency, a sound that vibrates in the back of your skull. This is the architecture of silence, a space engineered to be invisible to the world while capturing every invisible pulse that travels through the ether. Your boots make a soft, rhythmic thud against the linoleum, a sound that seems to be swallowed by the walls almost as soon as it is made. As you move deeper into the facility, you reach the heart of the operation, the specialized chambers where the true work begins. You step into a room that feels different from any other you have ever occupied. Here, the walls are not merely plaster and lath. They are lined with thick sheets of copper and lead, creating a seamless Faraday cage that isolates this space from the rest of the electromagnetic world. You run your hand along the cool, metallic surface of a door frame, feeling the precision of the shielding. Inside these rooms, the air is devoid of the static and interference of the outside world. There are no stray radio waves here, no accidental signals from a passing truck or a distant civilian broadcast. It is a vacuum of information, a sacred void where the only signals present are the ones you choose to invite in through the massive, hidden antennae arrays buried deep beneath the earth or disguised as chimneys on the roof. You take your seat at a heavy wooden desk, the grain of the oak smoothed by the hands of those who sat here before you. The chair creaks slightly as you settle in, a small human sound in a room filled with the glowing eyes of vacuum tubes and the steady, rhythmic clicking of teleprinters. You feel the slight ache in your lower back, the legacy of many hours spent hunched over a headset, but you find a strange comfort in the physical demands of the job. To your left, a small brass lamp casts a warm amber glow over your workspace, illuminating the stacks of cipher books and the sharpened pencils that wait for your command. This is your world now. A few square feet of shielded space where the fate of nations is distilled into rows of 5-digit code groups. The layout of the station is a masterclass in compartmentalization. You know that just beyond the lead-lined walls of the operations room lie the living quarters, a series of small, Spartan rooms that attempt to mimic the comforts of a home you rarely see. You can almost smell the faint aroma of cabbage soup and strong black tea wafting from the communal kitchen, a domestic scent that clashes with the sterile metallic environment of the listening post. In your own small room, There is a narrow cot with a wool blanket that feels heavy and scratchy against your skin, a small bookshelf containing a few approved novels, and a framed photograph of a family whose faces are beginning to blur in your memory. You spend your off hours here, caught in a strange limbo between the high-stakes world of international espionage and the crushing boredom of a confined, repetitive existence. You find yourself reflecting on the paradox of your surroundings as you sip a glass of lukewarm tea. The walls around you are thick enough to withstand a blast, yet they are designed to be as porous as a sponge for the secret transmissions of the enemy. You are living inside a giant ear, a sensitive instrument, tuned to the frequency of hidden things. The architecture reflects this duality. The heavy, reinforced stairwells and the thick, steel-reinforced doors suggest a fortress, while the delicate wiring and the rows of sensitive dials suggest a laboratory. You are both a prisoner and a guardian of this space, bound by oath and by the physical limitations of the station, to remain within these walls until your shift, or perhaps your tour of duty, is finally complete. As the hours crawl by, you become hyper-aware of the sounds of the building itself. You hear the slow, rhythmic thump of the ventilation system, a mechanical heartbeat that keeps the air from becoming too stale. You hear the distant, muffled voices of your colleagues in the dining hall, their laughter sounding thin and hollow through the heavy insulation, and always there is the static, the constant, rushing sound of the universe that fills your headphones whenever you dial into the darkness. It is a sound like falling water, or the wind moving through a vast, empty forest. Within that static, you listen for the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a Morse key, or the distorted, ghostly warble of a voice encrypted beyond recognition. The transition from your living quarters to the operations room is a ritual you perform several times a day. You wash your face in cold water, feeling the sharp sting of it wake your senses. You pull on your heavy wool sweater, the fibers catching on the stubble on your chin. You walk through the series of heavy doors, each one requiring a different key or a whispered password to a guard who looks just as tired as you feel. By the time you reach your desk, the domestic world has vanished completely. There is only the glow of the dials, the weight of the headset, and the cold, unyielding presence of the Faraday cage. The lead lining in the walls feels less like a shield and more like a second skin, protecting you from the chaos of the world while simultaneously trapping you within the silence of your own thoughts. In the quiet moments, when the signals are thin and the static is a low hum, you look at the architecture of the room and see the history of the conflict written in its design. The way the cables are neatly tucked into steel conduits, the way the floor is elevated to allow for the cooling of the massive mainframe computers in the basement, the way the windows are not windows at all, but thick blocks of translucent glass that let in light but reveal nothing of the world outside. It is a space designed for a human to function as a component in a machine, a biological processor of secrets. You feel the weight of the responsibility in the slow ache of your shoulders, a physical manifestation of the data you carry. And so, the days blend into nights, and the nights into days, marked only by the change of shifts and the ticking of the large circular clock on the wall that tracks time in 3 different zones. You find a strange peace in this hidden world, a sense of purpose that transcends the mundane reality of your surroundings. The station is a labyrinth of secrets, a place where the architecture of the state meets the architecture of the mind. As you lean back in your chair and close your eyes for a brief moment, the hum of the equipment becomes a lullaby, a steady, unchanging drone that promises that as long as you are listening, the world outside will continue to turn, oblivious to the silent sentinels who watch over it from the shadows of the shielded rooms. The clock on the wall of the communications room does not measure time in the way the rest of the world understands it. There is no sunrise here, no softening of the light at dusk, only the relentless, rhythmic ticking of a second hand that moves in synchrony with the pulse in your own temples. As a referent, your life is governed by the watch, a 24-hour cycle that blurs the boundaries between day and night until they dissolve into a single, grey continuum of service. The transition into the deep night shift is the most difficult, a slow sinking into a state of hyper-awareness where the body feels heavy, yet the mind is stretched thin like a wire. You feel the grit behind your eyelids, a physical manifestation of the hours spent staring at the oscillating green lines of the oscilloscope, but you cannot look away. To be a Cipher clerk is to exist in a state of perpetual vigilance, a silent guardian of the airwaves who must remain awake while the Soviet Union sleeps. The weight of the headphones is a constant companion, a heavy, padded pressure that has become as much a part of your body as your own skin. They are thick and cumbersome, designed to seal out the ambient noise of the station, the hum of the cooling fans, the distant click of boots on linoleum, the muffled cough of a colleague in the next booth, leaving you alone with the voices of the vacuum. After 6 hours, the tops of your ears begin to ache with a dull, throbbing heat, and the bridge of your nose feels the pinch of the frame, yet you dare not adjust them too often. To lift a cup is to risk missing a fleeting burst of data, a single character that could be the key to an entire sequence. You have learned to breathe in time with the static, a slow and shallow inhalation that mirrors the rise and fall of the atmospheric noise. The world inside the ear cups is vast and lonely, a digital ocean where signals drift like ghost ships, and you are the lone lighthouse keeper scanning the horizon for a flicker of intent. Your hands move with a practiced, somnambulist grace, hovering over the logbook where every minute must be accounted for. The paper is slightly rough beneath your fingertips, the ink of your pen a dark, indelible record of the void. You are required to log everything, not just the clear signals, but the texture of the silence itself. You note the crackle of solar flares, those sudden violent eruptions of energy from a distant star that spill across your frequency like a handful of gravel thrown against a windowpane. You record the atmospheric interference, the long, low moans of the ionosphere as it shifts and settles in the cooling night air. There are ghost signals too, echoes of transmissions from hours ago that have bounced off the edge of the atmosphere and returned to you like a memory, or the rhythmic, woodpecker tapping of over-the-horizon radar that thumps against your eardrums with a mechanical, heartless persistence. As the clock strikes 3 in the morning, the exhaustion reaches a plateau, a strange hollow feeling in the chest that makes the world feel fragile and translucent. This is the hour of the shadow watch, when the mind begins to play tricks, turning the random hiss of the static into the sound of rushing water or the faint, ghostly murmur of a crowd in a distant square. You find yourself leaning forward, straining to catch a pattern where there is none, your ears searching for the familiar cadence of a human hand on a Morse key. When a real signal finally breaks through, a sharp, clear series of chirps that slice through the white noise, it feels like an electric shock. Your spine straightens, the fog in your brain clears for a fleeting moment, and your pen begins to race across the page, capturing the 5-digit groups with a mechanical precision that ignores the trembling of your tired muscles. The air in the shielded room is cool and recycled, carrying the faint metallic scent of ozone and heated solder, a smell that lingers in your hair and clothes long after your shift has ended. There is a specific kind of solitude here, a loneliness that is shared by the other men in the room, yet never acknowledged. You are all islands in this sea of electronics, connected by the wires that snake across the floor, but separated by the absolute necessity of silence. Every few hours, a junior clerk might bring a glass of tea, strong, black, and overly sweetened, placing it silently on the edge of your desk. The warmth of the glass against your palm is a brief, grounding sensation, a reminder of the physical world outside the headphones, but you drink it slowly, eyes never leaving the dials. You begin to notice the subtle personality of the equipment, the way certain receivers hum with a slightly higher pitch as they warm up, or the peculiar resistance of a tuning knob that requires a delicate, feather-light touch to hold a frequency. These machines are your only confidants, the keepers of your secrets and the source of your weariness. You find yourself talking to them in your mind, coaxing a faint signal out of the background noise as if it were a shy animal. The meticulous logging becomes a form of meditation, a way to anchor yourself in the present moment when the past and future have been swallowed by the grey walls of the post. You write down the exact kilohertz, the signal strength, the duration of the burst, and the quality of the tone, each entry a small, precise brick in the wall of national security. Outside, perhaps, a light snow is falling over the birch forests, or a cold wind is whistling through the antennas that loom like skeletal giants above the bunker. But inside, there is only the rhythm of the watch. The exhaustion is no longer a burden to be fought. It has become a state of being, a soft velvet curtain that muffles the sharp edges of reality. You are a ghost among ghosts, a processor of shadows, waiting for the moment when the next referent will tap you on the shoulder and release you from the spell. Until then, you remain motionless, the heavy headphones pressing against your skull, your ears tuned to the infinite, whispering static of a world that never truly goes quiet, and the slow, steady beat of your own heart, marking the passage of another hour in the secret life of the state. The paper feels unnaturally thin between your thumb and forefinger, a gossamer leaf of cellulose that seems almost too fragile to carry the weight of empires. This is the one-time pad, a masterpiece of mathematical elegance disguised as a mundane booklet. It is the only truly unbreakable code known to man, a system where logic reaches its absolute zenith and then simply vanishes into the ether. There are no patterns here for a computer to find, no linguistic quirks for a cryptanalyst to exploit. Each page contains nothing but a sequence of truly random digits generated by the chaotic roll of dice or the unpredictable decay of isotopes, and because these numbers are used only once and then discarded, they leave no trail for the hunters to follow. You look down at the grid of numbers, the ink slightly blurred by the humidity of the bunker, and you feel a strange sense of peace in its simplicity. To encrypt a message, you simply add your plain text to these random digits. To decrypt, you subtract them. It is a closed loop of logic, a perfect circle that begins and ends with the physical possession of this specific sheet. As long as your copy and the recipient's copy remain secure, the secrets you transmit are as safe as if they had never been spoken at all. There is a quiet beauty in this realization, a comfort in knowing that amidst the sprawling, messy complexity of the Cold War, there is one small corner of your world that is governed by absolute, unassailable certainty. Your fingers trace the edge of the page, feeling the slight roughness of the paper, and you realize that you are holding the most powerful weapon in the Soviet arsenal. Not a missile or a tank, but a sequence of numbers that ensures the silence of the state. But this beauty comes with a ritual of destruction that is as regular as your own heartbeat. Once a page has been used, it becomes a liability, a ghost that must be exorcised before it can haunt you. You stand up from your desk, your joints popping in the cool, recycled air, and walk toward the small, specialized furnace that sits in the corner of the cipher room. It is a heavy, cast-iron affair, bolted to the concrete floor, its belly glowing with a dull orange heat. This is the final destination for every secret you handle. You tear the used sheet from the pad with a soft, rhythmic rasp, the sound echoing slightly against the damp stone walls. You do not simply throw it away. You watch as the flames lick the edges of the paper, turning the white cellulose into a delicate grey ash that curls and shivers in the updraft. There is a meditative quality to the burning, a release of tension, as the information ceases to exist in the physical world. You use a small metal poker to stir the embers, ensuring that not a single digit remains legible, that every trace of the day's work has been reduced to carbon and heat. The smell of burning paper is thick and slightly sweet, mingling with the metallic tang of the electronics and the faint scent of ozone. It is the smell of safety. As long as the furnace is fed, the silence is maintained. You lean against the warm iron of the stove for a moment, letting the heat seep into your palms, a brief respite from the perpetual chill of the listening post. You think of the thousands of other clerks scattered across the vast expanse of the Union and the satellite states, all performing this same ritual at this very hour, a silent brotherhood of fire, cleansing the record of the day's indiscretions. However, beneath this calm routine lies a dormant, pulsing terror, the threat of a compromised pad. If a single booklet is lost, if a single page is photographed by a mole or seized in a raid, the entire architecture of silence collapses. You have been trained to recognize the signs of a breach, the subtle protocols that signal an immediate emergency destruction. If the alarm sounds, if the heavy steel doors hiss shut and the red lights begin their frantic pulse, you do not reach for a weapon. You reach for the chemicals. Beside your desk sits a canister of high-intensity incendiary fluid, designed to consume your entire library of pads in a matter of seconds. You have practiced this movement until it is muscle memory. The unscrewing of the cap, the dousing of the safe, the strike of the long-stemmed match. In those drills, the air always feels heavy with the anticipation of loss. You imagine the heat of a total burn-off, the way the room would fill with a blinding white light as years of meticulously recorded silence are erased in an instant. It is a heavy burden to carry, knowing that your primary duty in a crisis is to become a pyre builder, to ensure that nothing survives but scorched earth and melted lead. You look back at your desk, at the remaining pages of your pad, and they seem different now. No longer just tools, but volatile substances that must be handled with the utmost reverence. The weight of the wool cloak on your shoulders feels a little heavier, the ache in your lower back a little more pronounced. You are the guardian of a void, and your life is measured out in the pages you burn. As the hour grows late, the furnace begins to cool, the orange glow fading into a soft, powdery grey. You return to your seat, the silence of the bunker wrapping around you once more like a heavy blanket. The headphones are cold when you slide them back over your ears, a stark contrast to the warmth of the stove. You adjust the dial of the shortwave receiver, searching through the layers of static for the next string of numbers, the next sequence of random digits that will dictate your movements. The world outside continues its frantic, noisy spin, but here, in the heart of the secret post, time is marked only by the turning of a page and the flicker of a flame. You find yourself thinking about the mathematicians who designed these pads, men and women working in windowless rooms in Moscow, obsessed with the purity of randomness. They have created a shield that no sword can pierce, a wall that no battering ram can bring down, and yet this entire system relies on you, on your discipline, your attention to detail, and your willingness to destroy what you have spent your life protecting. It is a strange, paradoxical existence. You are a scholar of the invisible, a librarian of the ephemeral. Each number you transcribe is a pebble dropped into a deep, dark well. You hear the splash, but you never see the ripples. The static in your ears begins to shift, a subtle change in the texture of the noise that tells you a transmission is beginning. You pick up your pencil, the wood smooth and familiar in your hand, and prepare to marry the incoming signal with the numbers on your fresh page. The ritual begins anew. The mathematics are perfect, the furnace is ready, and the secrets are safe within the thin, fragile leaves of the one-time pad. You breathe in the lingering scent of wood smoke and ink, settling into the rhythm of the work, a ghost among ghosts, drifting through the long, quiet hours of the night. The static in your headset is not merely noise, it is a vast, invisible ocean, and you are a lone fisherman casting nets into the dark. You adjust the heavy Bakelite dial of the receiver, feeling the slight, oily resistance of the mechanism against your fingertips. The metal casing of the radio is warm, humming with a low-frequency vibration that seems to travel up your arms and settle in your chest. Outside the reinforced concrete walls of the station, the Russian winter wind howls across the desolate plains. But here, in the amber glow of the vacuum tubes, you are tuned to a different world entirely. You are listening to the heartbeat of the West, 1,000 miles away, captured in the delicate oscillations of the ionosphere. As you lean forward, the coarse wool of your sweater chafes against your neck, a constant, grounding reminder of your physical presence in this cramped room. You reach for a fresh sheet of paper, the grain of the pulp rough beneath your hand. The signals begin to coalesce. You recognize the rhythmic staccato pulse of a NATO diplomatic cable moving between Brussels and Washington. It is a series of coded pulses, a digital language that you have learned to interpret not just with your mind, but with your ears. You don't need to see the transcript to feel the urgency in the transmission. There is a certain cadence to the encryption, a frantic quality to the bursts that suggests a crisis is unfolding in a cabinet room you will never see. You begin to transcribe, your pencil moving in a slow, hypnotic dance, capturing the raw data that will later be fed into the great maw of the decryption computers in Moscow. There is a strange intimacy in this work, a sense of being a silent passenger in the lives of men who do not know you exist. Sometimes the rigid discipline of the airwaves falters. A technical failure on a distant relay station, a solar flare disrupting the ionospheric layers, or perhaps just a moment of human carelessness, and suddenly the wall of encryption crumbles. You hold your breath, your heart hammering a soft rhythm against your ribs as the garbled screeching of the scrambled signal gives way to the clear, resonant sound of a human voice. These are the clear voice transmissions, the rare and coveted prizes of your long nights. You hear the distinct nasal drawl of a United States Air Force pilot, his voice crackling with the static of high-altitude flight. He is talking to a ground controller in West Germany, his tone casual, almost bored. You listen to him complain about the quality of the coffee at the base, or the way the cold seeped through his flight suit during the pre-flight check. It is a startlingly mundane window into the life of the adversary. You find yourself noticing the way he rounds his vowels, the specific slang he uses, words like bureaucracy or red tape, spoken with a frustration that mirrors your own. You realize with a slow, contemplative ache that while your ideologies are separated by an unbridgeable chasm, your frustrations are remarkably similar. You are both small cogs in vast, indifferent machines, staring out at the same stars from different sides of the horizon. Translating these intercepts requires more than just a knowledge of English. It requires a deep, almost intuitive understanding of a culture you have been taught to fear. You keep a small, leather-bound notebook tucked into the pocket of your tunic, filled with scribbled notes on American idioms and cultural nuances. You have learned that when a pilot says he is behind the 8 ball, he is not speaking of a game, but of a precarious situation. You have puzzled over references to baseball scores and the names of Hollywood actresses, trying to piece together a map of the American psyche from these fragmented whispers. As you write, you try to capture the exact inflection of his voice, the subtle shifts in tone that might indicate stress or deception. You are not just a clerk, you are a ghost writer of a hidden history, documenting the private thoughts of a nation. The air in the room is thick with the smell of ozone and the faint metallic tang of hot solder. You shift your weight in the hard wooden chair, feeling the dull ache in your lower back that comes from hours of motionless vigilance. The pilot's voice fades, replaced once more by the rushing white noise of the ether, but the impression of his presence lingers in the room like the smoke from a snuffed candle. You wonder what he looks like. If he has a family waiting for him in a suburb, you have only seen in grainy intelligence photographs. You wonder if he, too, ever looks at the moon and thinks of the silent listeners on the other side of the world. The night deepens, and the interceptions grow more complex. You move from the casual chatter of pilots to the dense, bureaucratic language of the State Department. These cables are filled with a different kind of nuance, the polite, veiled threats of international diplomacy, the careful phrasing of men who are weighing the fate of millions in the balance of a single sentence. You translate the words for sovereignty, containment, and escalation, feeling the weight of their meaning settle in your gut. Each word is a stone placed on a scale. You work slowly, deliberately, ensuring that not a single syllable is lost in the transition from their world to yours. The pencil lead snaps, a sharp sound like a twig breaking in the forest, and you pause to sharpen it, the rhythmic rasp of the sharpener providing a brief mechanical melody to accompany the static. As the hours crawl toward dawn, the distinction between the two worlds begins to blur. The voices in your headset become as familiar to you as the voices of your own colleagues. You recognize the specific rhythm of a particular typist in London, the way she lingers slightly on the letter R, or the way a certain officer in the Pentagon always clears his throat before speaking. You are a silent observer at a dinner party where you are not invited, a shadow in the corner of a room 10,000 miles away. You find yourself empathizing with their fatigue, their moments of levity, and even their arrogance. It is a strange, lonely kind of connection, a bridge built of radio waves and secrets. You lean back for a moment, closing your eyes and letting the static wash over you. It sounds like a distant waterfall or the rustle of dry leaves in an autumn wind. In the darkness behind your eyelids, you can almost see the signals as threads of light, crisscrossing the globe in a frantic, luminous web. You are one of the few who can see the web, who can feel the tension in the strands. The responsibility is a heavy cloak, but there is a quiet satisfaction in the work, a sense of being at the very center of the world's secret heart. You are the filter through which the West is poured, the quiet mind that makes sense of the chaos. The radiator clanks in the corner, a sudden startling sound that brings you back to the reality of the station. The floorboards are cold beneath your boots, and the light from the desk lamp seems to have grown dimmer, or perhaps your eyes are simply tired. You take a sip of lukewarm tea, the bitterness waking your senses. There is still much to be done. A new signal is emerging, a low-frequency hum that suggests a naval transmission from the North Sea. You adjust your headset, the leather cool against your ears, and prepare to dive back into the ocean of noise. The secrets are waiting, drifting through the night air, and you are the only one there to catch them before they vanish into the light of the coming day. The walls of this room are painted a pale institutional green, a color meant to soothe, but which, after enough hours, begins to feel like the skin of a stagnant pond. You notice a small crack near the ceiling, a jagged line that looks like a map of a river you will never visit. This is the boundary of your world. Outside these reinforced concrete walls lies a city that does not exist on any public map, a place known only by a postal code and a series of numbers. There are no tourists here, no wandering strangers, no postcards sent to relatives in the countryside that contain anything more than vague assurances of your health. You live in a geographic ghost, a closed city where every face in the grocery store belongs to someone who has signed the same oaths as you, and every child in the schoolyard knows that their father's job is simply elsewhere. The isolation is not merely a matter of barbed wire and checkpoints at the city limits. It is a weight that settles into your joints, a slow-growing moss on the stone of your social life. When you walk home from your shift, the air is cold and smells of wet asphalt and coal smoke, yet you find yourself looking at the ground rather than the faces of your neighbors. You are all part of the same silent machine, yet the gears are never meant to touch. There is a strange phantom limb sensation to your existence, the feeling that you are part of a grand global conversation, whispering with the ghosts of American pilots and British diplomats, while remaining utterly unable to speak to the person living in the apartment next to yours. You become hyper-aware of your own shadow. In the canteen, as you stir a bowl of grey cabbage soup, you feel the gaze of the second section. They are the observers who observe the observers, the men with uncreased uniforms and eyes like cold glass who sit in the corners of the room. You know they are there to ensure the integrity of the state, but their presence creates a persistent, low-grade fever of paranoia. Did you linger too long over that decrypted transcript? Did you smile too broadly at a joke that could be interpreted as a slight against the administration? You find yourself performing even when you are alone, keeping your posture straight and your expressions neutral, as if the very air in your private quarters might be recording the tilt of your head or the cadence of your sighs. This constant vigilance breeds a peculiar kind of fatigue, a tiredness that sleep cannot quite reach. It is the exhaustion of a secret keeper who must keep secrets even from themselves. You learn to compartmentalize your mind, building high, thick walls between the person who decodes the movements of the Seventh Fleet and the person who enjoys the taste of a crisp apple in the autumn. But the walls are porous. In the quiet moments before sleep, the numbers and the codes bleed through. You see the patterns of the cipher in the way the raindrops streak across your window pane. 5 long trails, 3 short, a pause, and then a sudden rush of water. And yet, within this vacuum of forced silence, strange and delicate bonds begin to form. You look across the glowing vacuum tubes and the tangled wires at your fellow clerk, a man named Victor, whose hands are always stained with ink. You have worked beside him for 3 years. You know the exact way he clears his throat when he finds a particularly difficult string of characters. You know that he prefers his tea without sugar and that he has a slight limp in his left leg when the weather turns damp. You know these intimate, physical details, yet you have never once spoken about what you do. You have never shared the thrill of a breakthrough or the dread of a missed signal. Instead, your friendship exists in the margins of the unspoken. It is found in the way he silently slides a spare pencil toward you when yours snaps, or the way you both instinctively look toward the door when a heavy footfall echoes in the corridor. It is a brotherhood of the shadow. You are like 2 divers at the bottom of a dark lake, connected by the same airline but unable to see each other's faces through the silt. There is a profound, melancholy comfort in this. You are not alone in your isolation. The silence you carry is shared, and in that sharing, it becomes slightly lighter, a burden distributed across 2 sets of shoulders. As the weeks turn into months, the city outside the facility begins to feel less like a home and more like a waiting room. The shops, the cinema that plays the same sanctioned films, the park with its rusted swings, they all feel thin, like a stage set that might be folded up and carted away at a moment's notice. The only thing that feels real is the hum of the machinery and the steady rhythm of the code. You find yourself retreating further into the sanctuary of the signal. In the outside world, you have to watch your tongue, but here, in the cold glow of the oscilloscope, you are free to listen. You are a ghost among ghosts, drifting through the frequencies of a world that doesn't know you exist. Sometimes, during the long transition between the midnight shift and the dawn, you find yourself wondering about the person on the other side of the radio wave. Is there a clerk in a similar room in Maryland or Yorkshire, rubbing their tired eyes just as you are? Do they also feel the cold draft from the ventilation duct? Do they also fear the silent men in their own hallways? You feel a sudden, sharp kinship with your enemy. You are both trapped in the same architecture of secrecy, 2 sides of the same coin spinning in the dark. It is a thought you can never voice, a heresy of the heart that you must bury deep beneath the layers of your training. You adjust the dial, the friction of the knob a familiar sensation against your thumb. The static is a comfort now, a white noise that drowns out the ticking of the clock and the thrum of your own anxiety. In the world of the closed city, information is a currency and a weapon, but for you, it has become a form of companionship. You do not need to speak to be understood by the machines. You do not need to explain yourself to the numbers. They simply are, and as you lose yourself once more in the infinite variations of the cipher, the walls of the room seem to recede, leaving you alone in a vast, dark cathedral of sound, where the only thing that matters is the next pulse, the next letter, the next secret caught before it falls. The smell of ozone and burnt coffee has become the permanent atmosphere of your lungs, a heavy, metallic weight that settles in your chest as the clock on the wall ticks toward the midnight hour. It is October, 1962, and the air inside the bunker feels different tonight. It is thicker, charged with a static electricity that makes the fine hairs on your forearms stand on end. Usually, the flow of traffic is a predictable tide, a rhythmic pulsing of routine reports and diplomatic pleasantries that ebb and flow with the shifting of the sun across the Soviet Union. But tonight, the tide has become a flood. The teleprinters are not merely chattering, they are screaming. The sound of the keys hitting the paper is a relentless percussion, a staccato rhythm that echoes off the low, concrete ceiling until your ears ring with the sheer velocity of the information passing through your fingers. You feel the coldness of the metal desk through the thin fabric of your sleeve, a chilling reminder of the world outside this windowless room. The messages coming in are marked with the highest priority codes, sequences you have practiced in drills, but rarely seen in live transmission. Flash, top secret, immediate action. As you feed the strips of perforated tape into the machine, your hands remain steady, a testament to the thousands of hours you have spent perfecting this mechanical dance. Yet, beneath the surface of your skin, your heart beats with a frantic, uneven rhythm. You are a conduit for the most dangerous words in the history of the world, and as the letters coalesce into sentences under your gaze, the reality of the Cuban Missile Crisis begins to take shape in the flickering light of your desk lamp. The words speak of naval blockades, of silos being readied, of ultimatums whispered across the vast expanse of the Atlantic. You see the names of cities you have never visited, Washington, Havana, Miami, interspersed with the familiar coordinates of your own homeland. You think of your wife, sleeping in the small apartment 300 kilometers away, her breathing slow and rhythmic, unaware that the very air she draws into her lungs is being measured by the ticking of a doomsday clock. You think of your daughter's woolen mittens drying on the radiator and the way the tea smells when it is brewed just right in the morning. These small domestic ghosts haunt the margins of the coded text, making the ink feel heavier, the secrets more burdensome. You cannot call them. You cannot warn them. You can only sit in this chair, your back aching from the rigid posture of your duty, and ensure that not a single character is lost in translation. The silence between the bursts of transmission is almost worse than the noise. In those brief lulls, the hum of the ventilation system becomes a roar, and the shadows in the corners of the room seem to lean closer, as if they too are waiting for the final word. You find yourself tracing the edge of a cigarette pack with your thumb, feeling the texture of the cardboard, grounding yourself in the physical world, while your mind drifts through the abstract landscape of global annihilation. You are a small man in a small room, yet the fate of millions rests on your ability to distinguish A3 from an 8, a dot from a dash. If you stumble, if your tired eyes skip a line, the misunderstanding could be the spark that sets the atmosphere on fire. So you breathe. You take a slow, measured breath of that stale, metallic air, and you wait for the next sequence to bloom on the page. Years later, the tension returns, though the calendar now reads November 1983. The world has grown older, and so have you. The equipment is sleeker, the codes more complex, but the feeling in the pit of your stomach is identical to that cold October night. This time the exercise is called Able Archer. On the surface, it is a game, a simulation of NATO forces moving through the motions of a nuclear release. But from your perspective behind the Cipher machine, the line between theatre and reality has worn dangerously thin. The volume of encrypted traffic from the West has spiked to a level that defies the logic of a mere drill. The reports coming in from your counterparts in the field are frantic, filled with observations of heightened readiness and movements that look less like a rehearsal and more like a curtain call for the end of days. You feel the weight of your wool tunic, heavy and scratchy against your neck, a physical manifestation of the state's expectations. Your fingers move across the keys with a practiced, ghostly lightness, even as your palms grow damp with sweat. The messages you are decoding now are dark and urgent, reflecting a leadership in Moscow that is convinced a preemptive strike is imminent. You are reading the thoughts of terrified men who hold the keys to the silos, and their fear is contagious. It travels through the wires, through the machines, and into your very bones. You look at the cup of cold tea on your desk, the surface of the liquid shimmering slightly with every vibration of the heavy machinery nearby, and you realize that you are witnessing the world hold its breath. In these moments of high crisis, the isolation of your post becomes a sanctuary and a prison. You are privy to the most terrifying truths on the planet, yet you are the most alone person in the world. You cannot share this burden with the guard at the door or the cook in the canteen. To speak of what you know is treason. To not speak is a quiet internal agony. You find yourself focusing on the mechanical beauty of the cipher itself, the way the rotors turn in a complex mathematical harmony, creating a wall of noise that protects the motherland. It is a distraction, a way to keep the mind from spiraling into the what-ifs that lurk in the dark. You tell yourself that as long as the machines are running, as long as the tape is feeding through the reader, there is still time. There is still a chance for the words to change, for the orders to be rescinded, for the world to wake up from this fever dream. The fatigue is a constant companion now, a dull ache that sits behind your eyes and makes the glowing lights of the console blur into soft, ethereal halos. You realize that you have forgotten what it feels like to be truly warm. The bunker is kept at a constant, cool temperature to protect the electronics, and the chill has seeped into your joints, making every movement slow and deliberate. You adjust the tension on a spool of paper, your fingers brushing against the cold steel, and you are struck by the strange intimacy of your relationship with these machines. They are the only ones who know the secrets you carry. They are the only ones who understand the weight of the silence that follows a particularly harrowing transmission. As the hours bleed into one another, you begin to see the patterns not just in the codes, but in the human behavior behind them. You can sense the exhaustion in the way a distant operator taps out his sign-off, the slight hesitation before a crucial string of numbers that betrays a trembling hand. You are all part of a hidden brotherhood of the key. Thousands of men on both sides of the Iron Curtain, sitting in similar rooms, breathing similar air, all terrified of the same shadows. You wonder if there is a man like you in a bunker under the Virginia woods, rubbing his eyes and thinking of his family, just as you are thinking of yours. You wonder if he, too, finds a strange meditative peace in the clicking of the keys, a way to drown out the sound of the world crumbling outside. Eventually, the red alerts fade. The high-priority traffic tapers off, replaced by the mundane reports of fuel consumption and personnel changes. The crisis passes, not with a bang, but with a slow, collective exhale that vibrates through the very foundations of the listening post. You finish your shift, your hands finally resting still on your lap, the tips of your fingers stained with ink and carbon. You stand up, your legs stiff and protesting, and walk toward the heavy steel door that leads back to the barracks. You have survived another night on the brink. The world is still there, fragile and flawed, but still turning. And as you lay down on your narrow cot, the sound of the distant teleprinters still echoing in your mind, you realize that your greatest victory is that the secrets you processed tonight will never have to be acted upon. You close your eyes, letting the darkness of the bunker wrap around you like a heavy blanket, and for the first time in days, you let yourself drift into a deep, dreamless sleep. The rhythm of your life is not measured by the rising sun or the changing of the seasons, but by the steady, mechanical pulse of the machines that surround you. Even in your sleep, you can feel the vibration of the floorboards, a low-frequency hum that tells you the facility is alive, breathing in data and exhaling silence. When you eventually wake, the air in your small quarters feels thick and recycled, tasting faintly of ozone and old paper. You sit up slowly, feeling the familiar stiffness in your shoulders, a physical souvenir from hours spent hunched over a desk. Your fingers, calloused in strange places from years of tapping out code, stretch instinctively, seeking the cold metal of the keys before you have even fully cleared the fog of rest from your mind. As you step back into the operations room, you notice that the atmosphere has shifted. The frantic, erratic tapping of manual Morse code, that stuttering human heartbeat of the airwaves, is becoming a ghost of the past. The world is accelerating, and you are accelerating with it. You watch as your colleagues wheel in new cabinets, heavy and grey, smelling of fresh industrial paint and the sharp, clean scent of new electronics. These are the Almaz systems, the first true heralds of a digital age that is beginning to swallow the old ways of the spy. You run a hand over the smooth, cool casing of a new terminal, and for a moment you feel a strange sense of loss. The intimacy of the hand-keyed message, where you could recognize a specific operator in Vladivostok or Berlin just by the fist or the swing of their rhythm, is being replaced by something colder and much faster. The air around you is now filled with the sound of high-speed teletypes. It is no longer a series of dots and dashes that you can hum along to. It is a relentless, mechanical chatter, like the sound of 1,000 tiny hammers hitting 1,000 tiny anvils. These machines do not sleep, and they do not tire. They process information at speeds that would have seemed like sorcery only a decade ago. You sit down at your station and adjust the headset, but instead of the rhythmic chirping of a distant radio op, you hear the screech and hiss of a digital burst. It is a dense, compressed packet of information, a whole day's worth of secrets condensed into a few seconds of white noise. You find yourself navigating the early landscapes of Soviet computing, where the logic is rigid and the stakes are invisible. The Almaz systems require a different kind of focus. You are no longer just a listener. You are a shepherd of data. You watch the flickering lights on the control panel, green and amber jewels glowing in the dim light of the bunker, indicating that the processors are churning through the encrypted layers of the West's latest transmissions. The heat in the room rises as the vacuum tubes and early transistors work through their cycles, and you find yourself peeling back the collar of your heavy wool tunic, seeking a breath of cooler air that never quite arrives. This new era brings with it a sophisticated game of cat and mouse that plays out in the invisible spectrums of the sky. You spend your hours chasing ghosts across the frequency bands. The Americans and their allies have become clever. They no longer sit on a single frequency, like a beacon in the dark. Instead, they use frequency hopping, their signals skipping across the dial like a flat stone across a pond. You have to be quick, your hand hovering over the tuning dial, sensing the subtle shifts in atmospheric static before the signal vanishes again. It requires a meditative state, a total immersion in the noise, where you learn to distinguish the natural hiss of the cosmos from the artificial stutter of a scrambled transmission. Sometimes the airwaves become a battlefield of pure sound. You encounter signal jamming, a wall of intentional noise designed to drown out the truth. It sounds like a physical weight, a roaring tide of static that makes your ears ache behind the padded cushions of your headset. You lean in, closing your eyes, trying to find the narrowest crack in that wall of sound where a few syllables of intelligence might leak through. It is an exhausting, invisible struggle. You feel the tension in your jaw, the way your teeth grind together as you fight the interference, your mind straining to piece together a coherent thought from the fragments of a shattered broadcast. Meanwhile, the introduction of these early computers has changed the very geometry of your workspace. The rooms are louder now, filled with the whirring of cooling fans and the clatter of punched tape feeding into the readers. You watch the long strips of paper, perforated with thousands of tiny holes, snaking across the floor like the molted skin of a digital serpent. Each hole represents a choice, a bit of logic, a piece of a puzzle that you are tasked with solving. You pick up a length of the tape, feeling the crispness of the paper between your thumb and forefinger, marveling at how something so fragile can carry the weight of an empire's security. As the night deepens, the mechanical noise seems to fade into a background wash, much like the sound of a distant waterfall. You become attuned to the specific timbre of the Alma's units, learning to hear the slight change in pitch that signifies a successful decryption. It is a moment of quiet triumph, a spark of clarity in the darkness. You reach for your thermos, the tea inside long since gone cold and bitter, but the caffeine provides a thin, sharp edge to your concentration. The shadows on the wall seem to dance in time with the flickering indicator lights, and for a moment you feel as though you are part of the machine itself, a vital component in a vast, silent engine that spans continents. The transition from the human to the digital is not just about speed, it is about the abstraction of the secret. In the old days, you felt the presence of the person on the other end of the line. Now you are communicating with a logic gate, a series of mathematical certainties, yet the physical reality of your life remains unchanged. The stone walls of the post are still damp to the touch. The smell of floor wax and stale tobacco still clings to your clothes. You are a bridge between two worlds, the ancient world of physical endurance and the new world of lightning-fast thought. You watch a new technician arrive for the late shift, a younger man who looks at the Alma's systems with a sense of wonder that you have long since replaced with weary familiarity. He moves with a nervous energy, his fingers hovering over the buttons as if they might bite. You offer him a small, knowing nod, remembering when you too felt the weight of the future pressing down on your shoulders. You show him how to balance the gain, how to listen for the ghost of a signal beneath the jamming, passing on the tradecraft that no manual can fully capture. It is a slow, patient process, much like the work itself. As your shift nears its end, you take a moment to step away from the glowing screens and the clattering printers. You walk to the end of the corridor, where a small, high window offers a glimpse of the world outside. It is a narrow slit in the concrete, but through it, you can see the deep, velvety blue of the pre-dawn sky. The stars are indifferent to the secrets you carry, their light reaching you from a distance that makes the Cold War seem like a momentary flicker in the dark. You breathe in the cold air that seeps through the glass, feeling it clear the scent of electronics from your lungs. The machines behind you continue their work, a relentless, invisible harvest of the airwaves. You know that when you return tomorrow, the technology will have shifted slightly again, the codes becoming more complex, the bursts of data shorter and more elusive. But for now, you simply stand in the silence, feeling the slow pulse of your own heart, a steady, human rhythm that no machine can ever truly replicate. You turn back to the room, the light of the terminals reflecting in your tired eyes, ready to record the final entries of the night before the world wakes up to a peace that you, in your quiet way, have helped to maintain. The smell of stale cigarette smoke clings to the heavy wool of your sweater, a scent that has become your constant companion in these windowless rooms, mingling with the ozone of the machines and the faint metallic tang of the tea you drink to stay alert. You lean back in your chair, feeling the stiff resistance of the wood against your spine, and you think of the men who sat where you sit now, only to one day simply vanish. To be a cipher clerk is to hold the keys to a kingdom of whispers, but those keys can become incredibly heavy, a weight that eventually pulls some men right out of their lives and into the unknown. You remember the stories whispered in the cafeteria, hushed tales of Igor Gouzenko, a man who lived your life in the autumn of 1945. He was a clerk just like you, working in the Soviet embassy in Ottawa, his days spent hunched over codebooks and his nights spent in the quiet shadows of a foreign city. You can almost feel the cold sweat on his palms as he walked out of that embassy for the last time, not with a lunch pail or a briefcase, but with over 100 secret documents stuffed beneath his shirt, crinkling against his skin with every panicked breath. It was a simple act of walking, one foot in front of the other, and yet, with every step he took onto the Canadian pavement, the entire architecture of the secret world began to groan and fracture. He didn't just carry papers, he carried the proof that the alliance of the Great Patriotic War was a ghost, a thin veil covering a sprawling network of sleepers and scientists who were funneling the secrets of the atom back to Moscow. As you trace the lines of code on your current ledger, you wonder what it felt like for him to sit in a newspaper office, desperate and ignored, holding the fire of the world in his hands, while the editors told him to come back tomorrow. The sheer, terrifying vulnerability of being a man who knows too much, standing on a street corner, while the people around him go about their grocery shopping and their commutes, entirely unaware that the foundations of their reality are shifting. When Gouzenko finally found sanctuary, the ripples he created turned into a tidal wave that crashed through every listening post from Berlin to Vladivostok. Suddenly, the Western powers realized that the Uncle Joe they had toasted at Yalta was presiding over an invisible empire of ink and shadow. For you, the clerk, the legacy of these defections is felt in the way the air in the room seems to grow thinner whenever a new security directive is posted on the bulletin board. The impact was not just political, it was deeply, uncomfortably personal. It meant that every man sitting to your left and your right was no longer just a colleague, but a potential crack in the hull of the ship. You look at your hands, stained with the faint purple ink of the mimeograph, and you realize that the West began to understand the Soviet mind not through grand battles, but through the mundane details that men like Gouzenko provided. They learned about the cutouts, the dead drops in city parks, and the way a simple phrase about the weather could signal the movement of a fleet. Because of a few clerks who decided they could no longer breathe the air of the embassy, the Western intelligence agencies began to build their own mirrors, reflecting your methods back at you. They started to look for the patterns you were taught to hide, and they became far more adept at hearing the silence between your transmissions. And so, the era of the Great Hunt began. In the wake of these betrayals, a cold clinical paranoia settled over the listening posts like a winter fog that refuses to lift. You feel it in the way the political officer looks at you during your weekly review, not at your work, but at your eyes, searching for a flicker of hesitation or a shadow of discontent. The moles became the monsters under the bed for both sides, the hidden traitors who might be sitting in the very next cubicle, sipping the same bitter coffee. You find yourself noticing the smallest things, a co-worker who buys a new coat he shouldn't be able to afford, or someone who lingers a bit too long at the filing cabinet after the lights have been dimmed. This atmosphere of suspicion turns the quiet work of a clerk into a psychological endurance test. You are told that the enemy is everywhere, but the enemy often looks exactly like you, tired, overworked, and quietly dreaming of a life where numbers don't rule the day. The hunt for these moles meant that the security protocols became a labyrinth. You are searched when you enter. You are searched when you leave. Your letters home are read by eyes you will never see, and your friendships are mapped out on charts in some distant office. It's a strange paradox. that in the pursuit of protecting the most secret thoughts of the state must strip away every secret thought of the men who guard them. As you sit in the dim light, the hum of the cooling fans providing a low, meditative drone, you think about the weight of those hidden files Gouzenko carried. They weren't just secrets, they were the physical embodiment of a choice. Every defector, whether they were driven by ideology, by fear, or by a simple soul-crushing exhaustion, changed the frequency of the Cold War. They forced the machines to become more complex, and the humans to become more guarded. You can feel the tension in your own shoulders, a knot that never quite unbinds, even when you are asleep. It is the physical manifestation of living in a world where a single person's decision to walk out of a door can rewrite the history of nations. The room feels smaller now, the walls lined with the heavy steel cabinets that hold the ghosts of 1,000 intercepted conversations. You wonder if the clerks on the other side of the ocean feel this same creeping chill, this sense that they are being watched by the very systems they serve. Perhaps they too look at the moon through a high, barred window and wonder if the person sitting in their chair 10 years from now will be considered a hero or a ghost. The codes continue to scroll, a river of light that flows regardless of who is watching it, indifferent to the loyalty or the betrayal of the hands that type the keys. You reach for your pen, the cool plastic, a grounding sensation against your skin, and you return to the task at hand. There is a certain comfort in the routine, in the way the ink flows onto the page in neat, orderly rows. You push the thoughts of defections and moles into the back of your mind, burying them beneath the data, where they can rest for another hour. The world outside is vast and complicated, filled with people making choices that will echo for decades, but here, in the soft glow of the terminal, there is only the code. There is only the rhythm of the transmission and the steady, quiet pulse of a life lived in the service of things that cannot be spoken aloud. As the night deepens, the silence of the post becomes more profound, a thick blanket that muffles the sound of the distant city. You are a small part of a very large machine, a single gear turning in the dark, and for now, that is enough. The hunt for moles continues in the corridors of power, far above your head, but down here, amidst the wires and the shadows, you simply breathe, in and out, watching the secrets of the world drift past like autumn leaves on a dark stream, waiting for the morning to bring a different kind of light. The scent of real coffee, rich and oily, drifts through the small kitchenette of your assigned quarters, a sharp contrast to the scorched grain smell of the chicory usually found in the state-run stores back home. You press the silver spoon against the porcelain rim, listening to the delicate clink, a sound of refinement that feels almost out of place in a world built on concrete and subterranean steel. This is the quiet reality of your life as a cipher clerk, a life defined by a strange gilded duality. Because you hold the keys to the state's most sensitive whispers, the state ensures that your belly is full and your surroundings are comfortable, creating a soft, padded world designed to keep you from ever wanting to look elsewhere. As you sit at the small wooden table, you feel the weight of a heavy wool sweater against your skin, a garment made of fine yarn that didn't come from a standard textile factory in Moscow. In your cupboard, there are tins of Hungarian ham, jars of Bulgarian preserves, and perhaps even a stray bar of West German chocolate, its foil crinkling softly under your touch. These small luxuries are the invisible threads of the golden cage, the unspoken agreement between you and the ministry. You are provided for in ways your cousins back in the village could scarcely imagine, yet you understand, with a clarity that hums in the back of your mind like a low-voltage wire, that every bite of imported fruit and every hour spent in a soft armchair is a payment for your absolute, unwavering silence. The physical sensations of this privilege are everywhere if you know where to feel for them. You notice the way the soap in your shower lathers more thickly than the chalky bars found in the public baths. You feel the smoothness of the high-quality paper in the journals you are permitted to keep, provided they remain within these walls. Sometimes, during the brief windows of leave you are granted, you are driven to a secluded dacha, a summer house tucked deep within a forest of silver birch and towering pines. There the air smells of damp moss and wood smoke, and the only sound is the rhythmic creak of a porch swing or the distant, lonely call of a cuckoo. These dachas are beautiful, serene places, far removed from the grey queues and the crowded communal apartments of the city, but they are also islands. You are never truly alone there. The perimeter is always watched, and the neighbours are always colleagues, men and women who, like you, have traded the messy freedom of ordinary life for the sterile comfort of the elite. You find yourself tracing the grain of the wooden table, thinking about the price of this comfort. It is a slow, creeping realization that your tastes have changed, and with them, your very sense of belonging. The more you grow accustomed to the quiet and the steady supply of goods, the more the world outside the fence begins to feel abrasive and foreign. You remember a recent trip into the city, how the noise of the trams felt like a physical blow against your ears, and how the sight of a woman waiting 3 hours for a shipment of winter boots filled you with a strange, uncomfortable mixture of pity and detachment. You are no longer one of them. You have been elevated, lifted into a stratosphere where the air is thinner and the stakes are infinitely higher. This is the hidden ache of the Cipher clerk, the difficulty of reintegration. As the months turn into years, you realize that you are becoming unfit for a normal Soviet life. When your tour of duty eventually ends, where will you go? You have seen too much, and you have lived too well. You imagine yourself standing in a standard grocery store, looking at the empty shelves and the tired faces of your countrymen, and you know that you would feel like a ghost haunting your own life. The secrets you carry act as a barrier, a thick pane of glass between you and everyone you ever loved. You cannot tell your mother why you have extra rubles in your pocket, and you cannot tell your old school friends why you spend your holidays in restricted zones. You find yourself retreating into the silence, preferring the company of your fellow clerks, the only people who understand the specific weight of the crown you wear. The silence of the listening post begins to feel like a sanctuary rather than a prison. Here, in the dim light of the bunker, the world is orderly. The rules are clear. You process the data, you protect the code, and in return, the machine protects you. You feel the cool, recycled air moving through the vents, a constant soothing breeze that carries no dust from the street. You adjust your headset, the leather ear cups soft and familiar against your temples. There is a strange peace in knowing that your survival is tied to your compliance. It simplifies things. It removes the burden of choice. As long as you remain a loyal gear in the machine will continue to feed you, clothe you, and keep the harsh realities of the 20th century at arm's length. And yet, in the middle of the night, when the machines are humming their low electronic lullaby, you sometimes wonder if you are losing your soul to the silk and the chocolate. You think about the people you used to be, before the codes and the clearances. You remember the smell of the street after a summer rain, the taste of cheap bread shared with friends in a cramped kitchen, and the feeling of being just another face in a crowd of millions. Those memories feel thin now, like old photographs left too long in the sun. You are a creature of the shadows now, a resident of the golden cage, and the door is locked from the inside. As you prepare for your next shift, you move with a slow, deliberate grace, savoring the feeling of your polished boots on the floor. You check your reflection in a small mirror, noting the way your uniform fits perfectly, tailored to a standard that most citizens will never see. You look into your own eyes and see the reflection of a man who knows too much to ever be truly free again. But for now, the coffee is warm, The room is quiet, and the next packet of intercepted data is waiting for you. You step out of your quarters and back into the corridor, the heavy steel door clicking shut behind you, with a sound that is both a promise and a finality. The transition from the warmth of your room to the clinical chill of the workspace is seamless. You find your station, the familiar glow of the green monitors casting long, emerald shadows across the floor. You sit down, the chair supporting your back with ergonomic precision, and you begin the work once more. The world outside continues its frantic, noisy struggle, but in here, time moves differently. It flows like honey, slow and sweet, thick with the weight of hidden knowledge. You are the guardian of the silence, and in return, the silence guards you. You watch the reels of tape spin, a hypnotic dance of black plastic and silver light. Each rotation is a second of your life given to the state, and each second is rewarded with a security that others can only dream of. You have accepted the bargain. You have embraced the quiet. As the night deepens, you feel a sense of profound stillness settling over you, a calm that comes from knowing exactly where you fit in the grand design. The price of silence is high, but as you look around at the order and the comfort of your secret world, you decide, for tonight at least, that it is a price you are willing to pay. The shadows are long, the air is still, and the secrets continue to drift through the wires, waiting for your hands to catch them and tuck them away where they can never be found. The smell of stale ozone and floor wax has become a permanent part of your skin, a scent that lingers even when you are miles away from the consoles, tucked into the heavy, coarse sheets of your narrow bunk. You notice, as you walk the familiar corridors of the station, that the linoleum has worn down to a dull, translucent grey where the foot traffic is heaviest, a map of thousands of hurried steps etched into the very floor. The air inside the complex feels thicker now, heavier with the weight of years and the slow accumulation of dust that seems to defeat even the most diligent cleaning crews. As the 1980s stretch on, you find yourself noticing the small, persistent failures of the physical world around you. A fluorescent bulb in the main hallway flickers with a rhythmic, hypnotic twitch, casting a jittery light that makes the shadows seem to dance. You have reported it 3 times, yet the maintenance logs remain unsigned, and the bulb continues its erratic pulse week after week. It is a small thing, but it mirrors a growing sense of stagnation that has begun to seep through the concrete walls. The equipment that once felt like the pinnacle of human achievement now shows its age in ways that are increasingly difficult to ignore. You run your fingers over the edge of your desk and feel the jagged line where the wood veneer has begun to peel away, revealing the compressed sawdust beneath. The dials on your shortwave receiver, once smooth and precise, now have a certain grittiness to them, a resistance that requires a firm, deliberate twist to overcome. You sit in your chair, feeling the familiar ache in your lower back where the padding has collapsed, and you listen to the hum of the cooling fans. It is a lower, rougher sound than it used to be. Sometimes a fan will stutter, a metallic rattle echoing through the casing before it recovers its steady drone. You wonder, briefly, how many of these spare parts are left in the subterranean storerooms, and whether the new shipments will arrive on time, or if they will arrive at all. There is a sense of waiting, a long drawn-out pause in the rhythm of the world, as if the great engine of the state is idling, burning fuel but moving nowhere. The reports you process now carry a different tone, a strange, unsettling shift that makes the hair on your arms stand up in the chilled air. Words like glasnost and perestroika begin to appear in the decrypted cables, drifting through the wires like ghosts from a future you cannot quite imagine. You read the transcripts of speeches by Mikhail Gorbachev, and you find yourself pausing, your pen hovering over the paper. The language is open, almost dangerously so, speaking of transparency and restructuring in a way that feels like a betrayal of the very silence you have spent your life guarding. In the mess hall, the conversations have grown quieter, more guarded. You catch the eyes of your colleagues over bowls of lukewarm cabbage soup, and you see the same flicker of confusion you feel. The rules are changing, but no one has told you what the new rules are. You are still expected to listen, to record, to encrypt, yet the secrets you are protecting seem to be melting away in the heat of this new public discourse. You feel a profound sense of vertigo as you realize that the walls of your secret world are becoming porous. The distinction between what is hidden and what is known is blurring, and it leaves you feeling exposed, as if the thick concrete above your head has suddenly turned to glass. You spend your shifts staring at the green glow of the oscilloscope, watching the waves of sound rise and fall, trying to find the old certainty in the mathematics of the signals. But even the signals feel different now. They are cleaner, faster, pulses of light and digital precision that originate from the west, signals that your aging vacuum tubes and copper wires struggle to catch. It is a slow, quiet realization that settles in your bones like the damp cold of a Russian autumn. You sit in your cramped workspace, surrounded by the heavy, olive-drab cabinets of Soviet engineering, and you look at the glossy photographs of Western technology smuggled in through intelligence briefings. You see computers that fit on a tabletop, machines that can process in seconds what takes your entire department a day of labor. The technological gap is no longer a crack in the floor. It is a widening chasm, and you are standing on the side that is slowly crumbling. You touch the cold metal of your terminal and realize it is a relic, a monument to a philosophy of strength that is being outpaced by the sheer speed of innovation elsewhere. The weight of the wool cloak you wear during the night watch feels heavier than usual, the fabric scratching against your neck as you pace the perimeter of the equipment room. You can feel the cold of the stone floor through the soles of your boots, a deep, biting chill that no amount of tea seems to reach. You realize that the signals you are intercepting are becoming more complex, encrypted with algorithms that your current hardware can barely decode. There is a frantic energy in the way the technical officers scramble to patch together aging circuits, their hands shaking slightly as they solder connections that should have been replaced years ago. You watch them, and you feel a pang of sympathy, a shared understanding of the futility of holding back the tide with a leaking bucket. Meanwhile, the atmosphere within the post has shifted from one of disciplined purpose to a strange, listless anxiety. The officers who once walked with their chins high and their uniforms pressed now seem distracted, their gazes lingering on the television screens in the common areas where the news brings reports of protests, of changes in distant republics, of a world that is no longer content to stay in its assigned place. You find yourself retreating further into the physical sensations of your work to block out the uncertainty. You focus on the precise click of the keys under your fingers, the way the ink smells as it hits the paper, the specific vibration of the floor when the heavy generators kick in. These are the things you can trust. The cold, the hard edges of the machines, the familiar taste of the metallic water from the fountain. These are the anchors in a sea of shifting political winds. As the years of the late 80s pass, you notice that the quality of the paper you are given is changing. It is thinner, yellower, prone to tearing if you press too hard with your pencil. The light bulbs are not replaced as quickly, and some corners of the station have fallen into a permanent, dusty twilight. You walk through these darkened areas, your footsteps echoing softly, and you feel like a ghost in a machine that is slowly forgetting its own purpose. The grand design you once felt a part of now feels like an old tapestry, the threads fraying at the edges, the colors fading until the image is hard to discern. You sit at your station during a long midnight shift, the only sound the rhythmic clicking of a teleprinter in the next room. You look at a decrypted message from a station in East Berlin, a message that speaks of confusion among the border guards, of orders that are contradictory and unclear. You realize that the silence you have guarded so fiercely is no longer a shield, it is a shroud. The world outside is screaming, and here in the heart of the earth, surrounded by the most sophisticated listening equipment the state could provide, you are the last to truly hear it. You lean back in your chair, closing your eyes, and listen to the hum of the aging infrastructure, a low, mourning sound that seems to vibrate in your very teeth. The signals are waning, the lights are dimming, and you are left in the stillness, waiting for the final pulse to fade into the dark. The smell of scorched ozone and burning paper begins to fill the corridors, a sharp, bitter scent that clings to the wool of your heavy uniform and settles in the back of your throat. For years, the silence of the post was your only companion, but now, that silence is replaced by the frantic, rhythmic grinding of the industrial shredders. You stand in the doorway of the communication suite, watching as decades of intercepted whispers, of midnight secrets and coded warnings, are reduced to thin, white ribbons of confetti. There is no ceremony to it, only a desperate, hurried, mechanical hunger. The heavy steel cabinets that once held the weight of an empire's paranoia are being emptied with a cold, frantic efficiency. You feel the vibration of the machinery through the soles of your boots, a dull, pulsing ache that mirrors the throbbing behind your eyes. Your hands, usually so steady on the dials, are stained with the grey dust of toner and the soot of incinerated logs. Outside, beyond the reinforced concrete and the layers of lead shielding, the world you spent your life monitoring has finally broken its banks. The wall in the west has crumbled, not under the weight of artillery, but under the sheer force of people who simply decided they were finished with the old ways. And here, in the dim, flickering light of the bunker, you are finishing too. You pick up a pair of heavy wire cutters, the metal cold and oily in your palm. One by one, you begin to snip the multicolored veins of the mainframe. The copper glints in the low light before falling limp. There is a strange, hollow lightness in your chest as the green phosphor glows of the monitors finally wink out, leaving the room in a grey, natural twilight it hasn't known since the foundations were poured. As the days turn into a blur of dismantling, you find yourself wandering through the abandoned living quarters. The air is stagnant, smelling of old tea and the dampness of the earth pressing in from all sides. You see a colleague's half-finished game of chess left on a communal table, the wooden pieces covered in a fine layer of concrete dust. No one is coming to finish the game. The hierarchy that governed every second of your breathing life, the invisible threads of command that stretched all the way back to the Kremlin, has simply dissolved. It didn't snap with a loud bang, it just unraveled like an old sweater caught on a nail. You realize with a start that the orders have stopped coming. The teletype machines sit silent, their paper tongues stilled, waiting for a ghost that has finally left the machine. You fill a small canvas bag with your few personal belongings, a tattered book of poetry, a photograph of a woman whose face you can barely remember without the filter of distance, and a heavy brass key that no longer opens anything of importance. Moving through the garage, you see the massive transport trucks being loaded not with strategic equipment, but with anything that can be sold or traded. The high-tech vacuum tubes are tossed into crates alongside crates of canned meat and rolls of copper wire. It is a slow-motion looting of a history that no longer has a future. You see a young guard, barely 20 years old, leaning against a perimeter fence that used to be electrified. He is smoking a cigarette, his hat tilted back, looking out at the pine forests with a vacant, glazed expression. He doesn't even look at your papers as you pass. The gate is open, swinging slightly in the cold mountain wind, its hinges groaning a long, rusted note of surrender. Walking away from the base, the physical sensation of the open air is almost violent. The sky is a bruised purple, vast and terrifyingly wide after the low ceilings of the station. Your legs feel heavy, unaccustomed to the uneven terrain of the forest floor after years of treading on level, polished linoleum. You stop by a stream, the water rushing over smooth, black stones, and you realize that for the first time in your adult life, no one knows where you are. Your name is on 1,000 documents currently turning to ash in the incinerator pits. Your fingerprints are on keys that have been melted down. To the world, you are a ghost. A cipher clerk whose ciphers have all been solved or forgotten. The remote bases, those lonely islands of concrete buried in the Siberian permafrost or hidden in the mountains of the Caucasus, are being reclaimed by the silence they once tried to colonize. You imagine the snow drifting into the open vents, the ice cracking the foundations, and the moss slowly creeping over the radar dishes that once scanned the heavens for the end of the world. There is a profound, weary peace in this abandonment. The secrets you carried, the launch codes, the agent names, the frequencies of enemy submarines, they are no longer heavy. They have become nothing more than static. As you walk toward the nearest village, the smell of wood smoke from a chimney reaches you, warm and domestic, reminding you of a life that exists outside of shadows. You think of the others scattered across the crumbling map of the Soviet Union, men and women who are, at this very moment, stepping out of the dark and into the blinding light of a new, uncertain day. Some will try to sell what they know, but most will do what you are doing. They will simply walk away. You feel the rough bark of a birch tree as you steady yourself, the cold sap beneath the surface, a reminder of things that endure when empires fall. Your back aches from the years of hunching over a desk, and your eyes are strained from the flicker of the screens, but the air in your lungs is fresh. It tastes of pine and coming snow, the transcripts of 1,000 conversations, the lifeblood of your career are drifting as smoke over the treetops, becoming part of the atmosphere, invisible and harmless once more. You reach the edge of the woods where a narrow, rutted road leads toward the horizon. You don't look back at the grey concrete thumb of the ventilation shaft sticking out of the hillside. It is just a tomb now, a monument to a watch that has finally ended. You adjust the strap of your bag on your shoulder, feel the solid earth beneath your feet, and begin the long, slow walk home, a man with no secrets left to keep, moving through a world that has finally stopped listening. The rhythm of your footsteps on the gravel road is the only sound in the deepening twilight, a steady, physical metronome that replaces the frantic staccato of the teleprinter. Your hands, once stained with the purple ink of carbon paper and cramped from hours of gripping a heavy stylus, now hang loosely at your sides, swinging in time with your stride. You notice the way the air smells differently out here, away from the ozone and the heated vacuum tubes. It carries the scent of damp pine needles, of distant chimney smoke, and the faint metallic tang of an approaching frost. It occurs to you, as you walk, that the world you helped build in the darkness of those bunkers is the very world the rest of humanity now inhabits without a second thought. Every pulse of data that will one day fly through the air, every invisible stream of information connecting one side of the globe to the other, finds its ancestry in the silent rooms where you sat. The Cold War was a conflict fought with ghosts and echoes, a war of signals and ciphers that forced the mind of man to bridge the gap between the mechanical and the digital. As the years pass and the memories of the bunker begin to soften at the edges like an old photograph, you realize that your quiet labor was a precursor to a new age. The high-speed transmissions you intercepted, the complex algorithms you unraveled by hand, and the sheer volume of data you processed were the first tremors of a digital revolution that would eventually change the way every person on Earth thinks and communicates. You were a pioneer of the information age, though you wore a heavy wool uniform and worked by the light of a flickering bulb in a room buried beneath 20 feet of reinforced concrete. The technology that now fits inside a pocket started as a room-sized machine that hummed with a heat so intense it could blister paint. You remember the weight of the reels, the sharpness of the magnetic tape, and the way the glass of the monitors felt warm against your fingertips. It was a time when the virtual world was still tethered to the physical by miles of copper wire and the tireless focus of men like you. And yet, for all the progress that has swept across the landscape, there are parts of that world that refuse to fade away. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night when you cannot sleep, you find yourself tuning a small shortwave radio, the dial glowing a soft amber in your darkened room. You move the needle slowly across the frequencies, listening to the hiss of static and the rhythmic chirping of the ionosphere. Every so often, through the white noise, you catch a familiar sound. A woman's voice, flat and expressionless, reading out a string of numbers in a language you haven't spoken in decades. Or perhaps it is a short, repetitive melody, a nursery rhyme played on a synthesized glockenspiel, looping endlessly into the void. These are the numbers' stations, the lingering phantoms of a clandestine network that never truly shut down. They are the last remnants of the world you knew, messages still being sent to listeners who may no longer exist, or perhaps to a new generation of clerks sitting in new bunkers, waiting for a signal that will never come. The mysteries remain locked away, much like the secrets you once guarded so fiercely. Somewhere in the heart of a city that has changed its name and its flag, there are archives that have never been opened. Thousands upon thousands of files sit on heavy steel shelves, the paper turning yellow and brittle in the dry air. They contain the decryptions you labored over, the reports you filed, and the names of the people whose lives were changed by the flick of your pen. There is a strange comfort in knowing that some things are still hidden, that the world has not yet laid bare every shadow of that long, cold winter. The archives are a silent testament to a time when information was the most precious commodity on earth, a treasure to be buried and protected at any cost. You imagine the dust settling on those folders, a soft grey blanket over the echoes of 1,000 whispered conversations. As you finally reach the small house where a lamp burns in the window, you feel a deep, settling peace. The ache in your back from years of sitting on hard stools is a dull, familiar companion, a reminder of the endurance required to live a life in the margins of history. You think of the other clerks, the ones you worked beside for years without ever truly knowing. You remember the curve of a shoulder, the way a colleague would tap their cigarette against an ashtray, or the specific whistle of a man walking down a corridor. You were all part of a silent brotherhood, bound by an oath and a shared loneliness that words could never quite capture. It was a quiet kind of bravery, to spend your youth listening to the heartbeat of a world that didn't know you existed, to carry the weight of secrets that could never be shared with a wife, a child, or a friend. The loneliness of the clerk was not a burden of isolation, but a burden of perspective. You saw the gears of the world turning from the inside. You watched the grand dramas of states and empires play out in the form of encrypted text and intercepted radio waves. You knew the truth of things long before the newspapers or the historians, and you kept that truth tucked away in a small, locked drawer in your mind. Now, as you step over the threshold of your home and feel the warmth of the hearth, you can finally let that weight go. The world outside continues its frantic pace, louder and more connected than ever before, but you have earned the right to silence. You have finished your watch. You sit in your favorite chair, the wood smooth and cool under your palms, and watch the embers in the fireplace pulse with a soft orange light. The shadows on the wall dance slowly, mimicking the movement of the trees you left behind at the edge of the woods. There is no more static here, no more frantic searching for a signal in the noise. There is only the steady, rhythmic breathing of a house at rest. You realize that your legacy is not written in the history books, but in the very fact of the peace you now enjoy. The secret world has receded, leaving you here in the quiet, a man who once held the threads of fate in his hands and chose to weave them into a life of simple, profound stillness. As your eyes grow heavy, the memories of the bunker seem to drift away like smoke rising from a chimney. The grey concrete, the humming machines, the endless columns of numbers, they all dissolve into the soft fabric of the present moment. You are no longer a cog in a great machine, no longer a sentinel in the dark. You are simply yourself, wrapped in the comfort of a world that has finally stopped listening, allowing you to drift into a deep and dreamless sleep. The silence is not an empty thing, it is a full and heavy blanket, a reward for a lifetime of listening. You close your eyes, and the last thing you feel is the gentle, steady beat of your own heart, the only signal that matters now.